All right, this is the Cannabis News. My name is Rick Thompson. It is September 26th, 2017. Welcome to the Jazz Cabbage Cafe radio program. And let's start off with President Donald Trump. In his temporary budget dealing with Democrats, President Trump has agreed to continue the ban on using federal funds to interfere in states' legal cannabis practices. But as 2018 nears, a government stance is largely still up in the air. Now, you know this as the Rohrabacher-Farr Amendment, which is now being renamed the Rohrabacher-Blumenauer Clause, and it'll effectively serve to protect state medical marijuana programs from intrusion by federal authorities only until December 8th, 2017. How come? Because they approved it as part of a temporary budget extension, which provides some emergency relief for some of the funny natural disasters we've had. Now, the legislation has increasingly found bipartisan support in the past few years. In recent months, though, its iterations have also encountered some last-minute sticking points, like Attorney General Jeff Sessions. Late spring, he sent a letter to leaders in Congress asking them to forego the federal protections for cannabis, which states and their operators are already afforded. In July, the Senate Appropriations Committee approved their version of the new amendment and said, screw you, Sessions. And in August, a U.S. District Court upheld interpretation of the Rohrabacher-Farr that protect states' legally compliant good actors for the second time. But earlier this month, a committee from the Republican-held House instead chose to reject its version of the amendment for inclusion in the federal budget. Then, less than 1 week later, the president agreed to the clause's inclusion in that short-term federal budget he collaborated on with Dems, and that was a move that reportedly gave some Republicans pause. Let's talk about another place in Michigan that is sort of in a bad shape. Gaylord. Headlines from just earlier today, Petoskey News, Gaylord trooper sees large amount of marijuana. Now, let's see if that's actually true. On Monday, Michigan State troopers at the Gaylord Post received a tip about an outdoor marijuana growing operation on public property hidden off a walking trail in Bear Creek Township. Guys, that's stupid as hell. Don't do that. The witness who called it in had seen a man walking around tending to some plants with fertilizer. After further investigation, they noticed marijuana growing in pots and called the state police. Cops interviewed him. They served some search warrants, determined he was a suspect, and then they seized 30 marijuana plants. Now, in the state of Michigan, I really don't think we call 30 marijuana plants a lot of marijuana. Let's talk about the Michigan Medical Marijuana Facilities Licensing Act. Now, the MMFLA Licensing Committee has been meeting, licensing board. However, we received a press release from Licensing and Regulatory Affairs last week, saying that Michigan will allow stacking of certain licenses, what's sometimes referred to as one-stop shopping, for some medical marijuana businesses. Medical marijuana business in our state is, of course, expected to explode next year when the state begins to hand out licenses, writes Kathleen Gray from the Detroit Free Press. And new rules released Thursday by the Department of Licensing and Regulatory Affairs will prove to be even more profitable for certain entrepreneurs. They've allowed licensees to apply in 3 different categories for the same area: grower, processor, and dispensary, locating all of those businesses in one facility, which mirrors our marijuana micro-business proposal in the MI Legalize language. It's something we've had a lot of inquiries about, said a spokesman for Lara. People seeking licenses will still have to go through the approval processes in their home cities and the state, including background checks. And if approved, they'll have to ensure there are separate workspace areas, entrances, and exits for each of the licensed operating functions. Folks, that's the news today, September 26th, 2017. I'm Rick Thompson. Thanks for listening to Jazz Cabbage Cafe.